Welcome back to this completely unhinged series that I'm doing right now. If you didn't see the other ones, that's fine. There isn't really a specific order to watch these in if you want to watch the others. It's just that I'm going in the order of Pokemon by dex number, if that matters. Anyway, if you don't know what's going on, essentially I'm going through the entire Pokédex, covering every single Pokemon, and one really weird shower thought I came up with for all of them. And I tried to make it so that the things I'm saying are things that people haven't really talked about before. And some of them are just really, really in-depth and crazy. So, to get into it, we left off in the Johto region with Quillfish. Its Hisuian form has the letter Q on its tail, while the regular form simply has these two little ovals, which also kind of look like lines. So if you put that Q with those two lines, it looks like two things. First of all, it looks like 911, which is the number you call in some places to call the police, or just whatever you call that stuff, like the hospital, and you would call the hospital perhaps if you got poisoned, and Quillfish is a poison type. However, the other thing you could read that as, with the Q and then two lines, if you think of the first one as an I and the second line as an L, you get QIL. And assuming the Q carries a U sound with it, you could pronounce that as Quill, which is the beginning of its name. Scizor. Its image in the Blueberry Dex, which is from the Scarlet and Violet DLC if you don't know, it shows it with a Trapinch, and I don't know if that was intentional, but if you ask me, Trapinch's head sort of looks like Scizor's claws. And on top of that, if you look at Scizor's two arms combined with its head all as one, it almost sort of resembles Hydreigon, how it has the one head in the center and then two more simplified little arm heads on the side. Shuckle. It's called the Mold Pokemon, but it isn't poison or grass type, which is the two things that would come to mind if something's going to be called the Mold Pokemon. Also, it's apparently based on an Endolith, which isn't a bug, yet it's a bug type. Heracross. It's number 62 in the Sinnoh Dex, not the National Dex, just the Sinnoh Dex. The 62nd bug in Animal Crossing New Horizons is the Horned Dynastid, which is literally the bug that Heracross is based on. Sneasel. It received an ultra-rare card before getting an evolution, but its counterpart Gligar did not. Also, it got a Hisuian form, but its counterpart Gligar did not. Teddiursa. Early sprites and, specifically the first TCG card of it, have brown fur for some reason, even though its original art was orange like it's known as today. Ursaring. In contrast to Teddiursa only having early brown sprites, Ursaring has a mystery dungeon icon with orange fur, which, that's an older game, and that's Teddiursa's color, so it's like Teddiursa randomly has some sprites of Ursaring's fur, and Ursaring has a more obscure sprite with Teddiursa's fur. Anyway, Slugma. The deck says it will harden if it stops moving because, it's made of magma. But this may mean that it does this to evolve, since it gains the rock type and its back does harden, so perhaps, in order to evolve, all it has to do is simply just stop moving. Magcargo. Its card from Neo Destiny, the artwork shows a shadow casted by its flame, even though fire doesn't have a shadow. Swinub. So it's obviously a dual ice and ground type, and in the TCG there's a lot of cards of it, and some of them use the ground type and others use the ice type to represent it. All of the ones that show it as the ground type don't depict snow or ice in the artwork, while a lot of the ice type ones do. So I'm not sure if that was intentional, but I'd like to think it is. Piloswine. Its shiny has gotten brighter with each new generation, especially between the 2D sprites. Corsola. Old deck entries say it prefers unpolluted southern seas and can't live in pollution. It went on to get a ghost-type regional form in Galar, which is based in the northern hemisphere, so that might have been inspired by that. Remoraid. Its blue regular color and pink shiny are opposite of Corsola's and Corsola is literally the Pokemon in the dex that comes before Remoraid. Octillery. This is an interesting one, but it might not hold up forever. At least as of now, Octillery only has 2 ultra rare cards in the TCG. These are both from Sword and Shield sets, being Brilliant Stars and Battle Styles. What's interesting about that is that both of those sets have the same exact abbreviation, being BS. And I'm not saying that because, that stands for something, which it does. I'm just saying it's weird how Octillery's 2 sets that has ultra rares in have the same exact abbreviations. Delibird. It is the only flying type penguin Pokemon of the 6 that exist. All others are some combination of water, ice, or steel. Mantine. It is known as the kite Pokemon, while Remoraid is known as the jet Pokemon, which is weird because Mantine is actually based on a fighter jet, and Remoraid is supposed to be the gun that attached to it, or just a missile or something. So you would think Mantine would be the jet Pokemon, and then Remoraid would be, something else, like the missile Pokemon. Skarmory. The deck says its chick's wings aren't hardened at first, which would imply that they could give it a pre-evolution that is just pure flying type or flying normal type, sort of like how Rookity and Corvisquire go into Corviknight, which becomes steel type. Houndour. It has 3 different Pokédex images, one for Alola, one for Paldea, and one for Kitakami. The images have 1, 7, and 4 Houndour in them, respectively. 1 plus 3 equals 4, and 4 plus 3 equals 7. Each image has 3 more Houndour than another one. If you look at all of its Gen 2 sprites, the ones they used for Gold and Silver, they kind of seem unfinished compared to what its actual design is, but then if you look at its Crystal sprite, that actually resembles what it's supposed to look like, especially for its colors. Even though they're literally all on the same system, the Game Boy Color, so you'd think they would have actually figured that out off the bat. Kingdra. It shares the dragon type of Dragolge, but the types they don't share are water and poison, which is Skrelp's type combo, and all 3 are based on the same animal. Phanpy. It is known as the long-nosed Pokemon, but Donphan is not, even though Phanpy's is obviously shorter than Donphan's because it's the pre-evolution, so Donphan's nose is in fact longer. Donphan. It, along with some other Generation 2 Mon, have a silver color palette and a golden shiny color scheme. Now, that's not true for all of them. Some of them actually have golden color palettes, but then a silver color scheme, and they're shiny, but there's just a lot of Gen 2 Pokemon that are either gold or silver in their 2 color schemes, which obviously ties into their debut games, Gold and Silver. Porygon 2. Early dex entries hint at the eventual creation of Porygon Z, the way they talk about something potentially going wrong. Stantler. 20 is the number of times you need to use Psyshield Bash for it to evolve in Legends Arceus, and its dex number is 234. If you subtract those numbers from each other, you get 214, and number 214 in the Pokédex is Heracross, and both of these Pokemon have the word Hoenn in their category name. Smeargle. The footprint on its back is not the same as the actual Smeargle footprint as depicted in the dex, despite the fact that the dex mentions that the footprint on its back is a Smeargle footprint. Tyrogue. It shares most of its similarities with Hitmonchan, even more so than Hitmontop, even though Hitmontop was the one that was introduced in the same generation as Tyrogue. And what I'm talking about is that both Tyrogue and Hitmonchan, they have a similar mouth shape, head crests, and shoes, or I'm going to call those shoes just like feet nubs that look like shoes. Anyway, Hitmontop. Its foot from below sort of resembles a Roggenrola. Smoochum. Its original shiny is closer to its modern colors than its original sprite for some reason. Elekid. Its regular colors and shiny are the opposite of what they were originally in Gen 2 for some reason. I don't know why they changed shinies so much for no reason, but yeah. Magby. For some reason, it got a holo card in the Gen 2 era, but Elekid and Smoochum didn't, even though they're sort of like a trio. Miltank. Now this might be one of the greatest ones yet. The Moo Moo Farm, which is a location in Pokemon that houses Miltanks, That obviously shares its name with a track from Mario Kart, being Moo Moo Farm. But to expand on this, taking Miltank's dex number, which is 241, you can break it down into the three numbers 2, 4, and 1. Moo Moo Farm, in its debut game, is the second of 4 tracks in the first cup of its debut game. 241, like Miltank's dex number 241. And just for the record, I'm acting like this is really deep. I'm not that serious about it. It's a joke. But these are actual things I am finding regardless of that. Anyway, Blissey. It strangely reverts to a similar to its regular color scheme in its shiny form when evolving from Chansey, because Happiny, its shiny colors and its regular colors are very identical, and so are Blissey's, but then Chansey actually has a unique shiny color, so I'm not sure why it's like that. It's just weird. Anyway, Raikou. It has the least shiny cards of the legendary beasts, and it's the only one without a shiny vault card. It also seems to be the most forgotten of the beasts, since Entei had a movie, and Suicune had a literal game, and then Raikou has what? I don't even know. Entei. It is the only legendary dog to lack both blue and or purple in its color scheme, because Raikou has blue and purple on its tail and its cloud thing, and then Suicune has blue and purple on its hair and its entire body. Suicune itself. Its beta design is a lot more reminiscent of the water type that it has than its actual design is. It's called the Aurora Pokemon, which would obviously imply it being an ice type, and it uses an ice type move in Smash Bros. And it simply looks like an ice type as well, especially with that icy crystal looking thing on its head. So you would think they would have changed it to an ice type or just made it an ice type, but they didn't. Larvitar. Its tail sort of resembles one half of a Pineco, both of which are from Gen 2. Pupitar. It functions as a pupa stage between Larvitar and Tyranitar, even though they don't really change much like a caterpillar to a butterfly would. In fact, Larvitar and Tyranitar are very similar. They're both just bipedal lizard dragon creatures. So you'd think if it's going to be a pupa stage in between, it would be more like Bagon to Salamence, where it grows wings and changes a lot. Tyranitar itself. The diamond at its center resembles Pupitar, suggesting Tyranitar breaks out of the shell, but then proceeds to grow around it as it's breaking out. And shiny Tyranitar's diamond is the same color as shiny Pupitar, which is purple. Lugia. You could technically justify it being psychic type through some complex thought process. And all of this is complex thought process, but that's the point. So, it's the mascot of Pokemon Silver. We all know that. And Silver is sometimes called the Tears of the Moon. I'm not sure who calls it that, but that's apparently a thing. But connecting it to the moon, obviously the moon, there's that whole concept of it has the gravitational pull with the sea, and Lugia is described as the guardian of the sea. So if you think of the gravitational pull of the moon, which ties back to Lugia being the mascot of Silver, you can think of that gravitational pull as psychic, which would justify it being psychic type and not water type. Even though it would still totally make more sense if it was water type, since it's, the guardian of the sea. Ho-Oh. The only colors of the rainbow it is missing are blue and purple. Although you could argue it has blue because its feet are kind of blue, but I would call that gray, honestly. Anyway, Entei is also lacking of these two colors, as I mentioned earlier, making them the only two of the 4 members of the Tower Legends, which I guess would just be, half of them, to lack those colors. And it's weird because they're the only 2 fire types of the group of 4. And by Tower Legends, I mean the 3 beasts and Ho-Oh. Celebi. It is a grass-type Pokemon with time powers. It is the 100th Pokemon in the Johto Dex. Voltorb, which is the 100th Pokemon in the Kanto Dex, received a grass-type regional form in Legends Arceus, which is a game that has a lot of time-based and time travel motifs, which ties back to Celebi being a grass-type time-traveling Pokemon. And now we get to move into Hoenn. Not going to finish it in this video, but I'm going to get through some. Trico. It is the only one of the 3 Hoenn starters. They all have gold star cards in the TCG. This is where I'm getting at. It is the only one of the 3 whose artwork extends off of the right border of the card. Grovyle. The design of its hair is similar to Articuno's tail if you look at them. It's like long, feather-like appendages of 3 portions connected. Sceptile. It has seeds on its back, but it only learns seed-based moves like bullet seed or stuff like that by TM or by breeding. So you'd think since it literally has seeds on its back, it would be able to do them on its own, but it has to be taught in special ways. Torchic. The beta design's ears resemble Lucario's hair. Combuskin. The inverse of its dex number, which is 256, the inverse of that is 652, which is Chestnut. Both of those are fighting-type starter Pokemon. Blaziken. This is a bit of a stretch, but its hair sort of resembles Samson Oak's hair. And additionally for its hair, Mega Blaziken's hair looks like a Y, while its chest hair looks like an X. And X and Y were the games that introduced Mega Evolution. However, that might not have been intentional simply because Mega Blaziken was actually introduced in ORAS, not X and Y. But you know. Anyway, Mudkip. This is also a really good one. So Mudkip, its name comes from the animal known as a mud skipper, and they simply just omitted some of the words out of that. The letters it lacks that are in Mudskipper are S, E, and R. So those are the letters they took out, obviously. They also took out a single P, but P is still in its name, so I'm not counting that. So we're just talking about S, E, and R here. And what's really weird is that its final evolution, Swampert, has those letters, S, E, R. And not only that, they also appear in Swampert's name in the order that they appear in the word Mudskipper, S, E, and R. And you know, that wouldn't really be a surprise if Swampert was also named after a Mudskipper, but it's not. Its name comes from swamp and expert or rampart, not Mudskipper. So the fact that the letters that Mudkip lacks from its name origin are present in the order that they came from out of its name origin appear in Swampert that way. Yeah, I even surprised myself with that one. Marshtomp. Its Japanese name contains craw, also featured in Crawdon's English name, and both of them are dual-type water types from the Hoenn region. Swampert. Its Mega Evolution design suggests it would be a fighting type just because of how muscular it is and how big its fists are, but they probably didn't give it the fighting type and just kept it ground type because Blaziken is also fighting type and it wouldn't make sense to have 2 of the same type starter. Poochyena. It is the first pure dark type in the Dex, excluding regional forms. And you might be thinking, well, Umbreon exists. And what I mean by that is that it's the first pure dark type in the Dex, excluding regional forms, that can evolve in terms of Dex order. Very, very specific and useless, but that's the point. Mightyena. Its category, which is the Bite Pokemon, calls to mind the Dark-type attack Bite. Mightyena is a pure Dark type, and it can learn Bite, which is a Dark-type attack. Zigzagoon. The amount of white stripes it has is 3. It debuted in Gen 3. Accounting for all of its stripes, it has 6, and ORAS, the remakes of its debut games, came out in Gen 6. Linoon. Its icon from Pokemon Shuffle looks silver for some reason instead of having brown stripes, which this is a complete stretch and is totally not going to happen because it already has a regional form in Galar. But what if that means they're going to make a Steel-type regional form out of it one day? They're not, but whatever. Anyway, Wurmple. It seems like it would be Poison-type, but it likely isn't, simply because most of its line isn't, and the left half of its branch goes off into Silcoon and Beautifly, which have nothing to do with poison. Well, Dustox does, but that's the other half of its evolution line. But simply a Wurmple itself, you know, it has poisonous spikes on it, and it's like a poisonous caterpillar, so you'd think it would at least be poison-type. Silcoon. Technically, it should be Dustox's pre-evolution, because moths, they make silk cocoons, and butterflies don't, and Silcoon is silk, yet it evolves into Beautifly. So it should instead evolve into Dustox. Beautifly. Many similarities with Butterfree. Both of them are regional bugs, final evolutions in a 3-stage line, share the same exact type and category name, and they also have bug poison counterparts, Beautiflies being Dustox and Butterfrees being Beedrill. And they also have pretty similar names as well, Beautifly, Butterfree. Cascoon. It is probably the most similar Pokemon to the dex shape it has, and I mentioned this in the last video for Totodile, and what I mean by that is that the dex categorizes Pokemon into shapes, and as I said in the last video, a lot of them look nothing like the shape that they're categorized under, but Cascoon literally does look like this because it's literally just that oval orb with eyes. Dustox. It is poison type when butterflies are actually more often toxic than moths, so it would actually make more sense if Beautifly was the poison type and not Dustox. Lotad. It likely wasn't intentional, but each half of its name is essentially a juxtaposition. And what I mean by that is that they just completely go against each other. The first half of its name is lot, which is like a lot, a big amount. But then the other half of its name is tad, which means a little, so not a lot. Lombre. It's called the Jolly Pokemon, even though it honestly looks the most depressed out of its evolution line. This guy looks sad. He is not the Jolly Pokemon. Ludicolo. It is the only member of its line who has a smiley face looking character in its Japanese name. You know, that thing that looks like a smiley face and kids on Fortnite and stuff use in their name because they think it looks cool. Yeah, that one. It is the only one smiling in its official art. No way that was intentional. Anyway, I'm just gonna move on. Seedot. Its footprint looks like a Super Mario mushroom, especially as they appear in Super Mario Land. Nuzleaf. Impidimp, which also shares its category name being the Wily Pokemon, is also a dual dark type, non-fully evolved Pokemon based on a mythical creature, though they are based on different mythical creatures. Shiftry. The dex says it can create cold winds. Unlike some Pokemon who should be able to learn attacks but can't, it can indeed learn Icy Wind, so good job Game Freak for actually making things line up. Tailo. Its name is like tail low, when it actually keeps its tail up in art and sprites and stuff. So its name should be Tail Up. But obviously I get its name comes from Swallow, which is the bird it's based on, but still. Swallow. Its dex number minus the level it evolves from Tailo equals 255. Number 255 in the dex is Torchic, which is a fire-type Pokemon based on a bird, and Swallow is obviously also based on a bird, but interestingly, it has a fire-type Delta species card. That definitely wasn't intentional, but I found it out. I cracked the code, so to me it was. Anyway, Wingull. Its footprint looks more like a hoof than a bird foot, which is weird, because birds don't have hooves. Pelipper. Its electric-type Delta card may be inspired by its yellow dex color, even though its feathers are actually white and blue. But I guess it has the yellow dex color just because its beak is a very big part of its body and is yellow. Ralts. It has a fire-type Delta card, and yeah, I'm mentioning Delta cards a lot because they were introduced in Gen 3, so I might as well. Kirlia. The inverse of its dex number is 182, which is Bellossom. Both of them are feminine, and by feminine I don't mean they're 100% female, I just mean they look feminine. They're feminine green Pokemon that seem to have dresses incorporated into their body and red objects on either side of their head, Kirlia's being the little red bumps and Bellossom's being the red flowers. Gardevoir. Its Japanese name sounds like Sir Knight, which would fit Gallade much better since it kind of looks like a knight and is the more masculine one, which would fit that Sir word better. Surskit. Its dex shape is insectoid, and apparently the dex shapes actually have names, and the one that Surskit has is called Insectoid, and it's shown as having 6 legs, even though Surskit only has 4 legs and not 6. And there is actually a quadruped dex shape for Pokemon with 4 legs, so technically it should have that. Masquerain. Its dex color is blue instead of white for some reason, even though it's clearly white in color and not blue. Shroomish. It is the only of the 6 Pokemon of the category called Mushroom to be pure grass, and not something else. Breloom. It has many similarities to Sceptile. Both of them are final form grass types from Gen 3 with red and green colors. They're both bipedal. They both have dinosaur-like designs and spherical seeds attached to their bodies, Breloom's being on its tail and Sceptile's being on its back. Slack Off. It can learn the attack Slack Off, which sounds very similar to its name, at level 9. Also, it evolves at level 18. 9 times 18 is 162. Number 162 is Furret. Both of these Pokemon are pure normal types with very similar color schemes. Vigoroth. It has many similarities to Zangoose, despite no relation in actuality. Both of them are Gen 3 pure normal type Pokemon based on mammals. They're both bipedal, have red and white fur, 2 claws on each hand, start with very late letters in the alphabet, being V and Z. Slacking. In its Blueberry Dex photo, 5 Pokemon appear that aren't part of its evolution line. 2 are on top, 3 are lower in the image. The first letters of their names, from top left to bottom right, spells DSCOD, or DS-COD. And DS-COD is in fact a thing because they released Call of Duty games on the Nintendo DS. Boom. No relation at all, but now there is. Nincada. Though sprites never show it having a mouth, there are 3 different TCG cards where it has a mouth and is smiling for some reason, which honestly just looks uncanny. Ninjask. It can learn Quick Attack, which you'd think it'd be able to, but from a lore perspective, this actually makes sense, because since it's such a fast Pokemon, perhaps it doesn't even need to know how to use Quick Attack, because it's already too fast to even worry about that. Shedinja. Even though it is the husk of Ninjask, they have different shapes in the dex, so you'd think they'd have the same, since it's literally just like Ninjask's corpse. Whismur. Its footprint resembles Tynamo's entire body. Loudred. The dex says it loses its hearing from how loud it is, but what's weird about that is that it has the soundproof ability, so that doesn't really line up. Exploud. Among all the members of its line, their English and Japanese names are both in reverse alphabet order. Makuhita. Its English name can be extracted from its Japanese name, leaving N-O-S behind. Backwards, this spells sun, and Makuhita is like Hariyama's son because it's the pre-evolution. Hariyama. It has an EX card with the word Aura in it. Lucario, which is another fighting type, is literally the Aura Pokemon. When you subtract their dex numbers from one another, you get 151, which is the original number of Pokemon from Kanto. Azurill. The letters it doesn't share with its Japanese name are A, Z, and L. And what I mean by that is that those are the letters that appear in its English name but not its Japanese. This calls to mind Legends ZA, which is the upcoming game, which is LZA. Nosepass. The dex says it only moves 3/8 of an inch every year, yet it can use many attacks that involve it quickly moving its entire body, like Takedown, Stomping Tantrum, Tackle, or Heavy Slam. You'd think to use any of those things, it would involve it like launching itself at the opponent. Skitty. It is the only Pokemon to evolve by Moonstone that isn't a type represented by Psychic in the TCG. All of the others are Poison, Fairy, or Psychic type that can evolve by Moonstone, and in the TCG, the Psychic type incorporates Ghost types, Psychic types, Fairy types, and Poison types, though it actually doesn't incorporate Poison types anymore for some reason, but it did at one point. So all of these have been represented by the Psychic type at one point or another in the TCG. Except for Skitty's type, which is normal. Delcatty. Hariyama's Japanese name is based on the word pincushion, even though Delcatty is literally based on a pincushion, and Hariyama is not. Sableye. Most dex entries mention rocks and darkness, but barely any mention anything about it being ghost type, which would make you think it would actually be Dark Rock. And that even goes against what a lot of people say about how it should be Ghost Rock, just because there are no Ghost Rock types. But in reality, it should be Dark Rock. Mawile. It has a V-Star card from the Sword and Shield era, which has a V-Star attack called V-Star Rondo. And the legendary dogs from Johto, they all have V cards from the Sword and Shield era as well, and all of their attacks have the word Rondo in them as well. And what's interesting about that is that Mawile, having the Steel type, does 1/2 damage to the types of all the legendary beasts, because Electric, Water, and Fire all resist Steel. Aron. Its name is obviously similar to the Elite Four member Aaron, just missing one A, but this actually goes kind of deep, because in the set Rising Rivals, there is an Aaron Scissor card, and Scissor is part Steel type like Aaron. Aron also appears as a card in that very set. Anyway, Lairon. It is known as the Iron Armor Pokemon. The inverse of its dex number leads to Samurott, which is a Pokemon that has the Shell Armor ability. Both have the word armor, of course. Aggron. Its XY era EX full art card has blue crystals behind it in the background, which is the motif of the Crystal Guardian set where it had an OG EX. Metatite. It evolves at level 37 and is dex number 307, so take the 0 out, it's both 37. Metacham. If you flip the blue portion of its shiny's head upside down, it sort of looks like it could be like a baby version of Regice. Electrike. A few similarities to Raikou. Both of them are pure electric-type dog Pokemon of striped patterns to some extent. They have 3-toed feet, the word Rai in their Japanese names. Manectric. It may not have been intended, but its upper leg and tail in its official art resemble a comet, which wouldn't really make sense for an electric type, but it looks like that, so I don't know. Plusle. Its dex number plus Minun's dex number is 623. 6 divided by 2 equals 3. Gen 3 was their debut gen. Minun. Obviously, it's named after the word minus, so incorporating that sort of math equation into its dex number makes a valid math equation. Its dex number is 312. 3 minus 1 equals 2. Volbeat. It and Illumise are the only pure bug types with wings that fly in their sprites, so they should totally be flying type. The reason I said they fly in their sprites is because Kricketune is also a pure bug type with wings, but you don't see it flying. Illumise. The inverse of its dex number is Wormadam's dex number. Both of these Pokemon are pure female bug types. Roselia. It has the poison type, even though rose thorns and roses are actually non-toxic. Anyway, that's probably like more than enough for this video, so gonna have to stop here. Don't worry, there's plenty more of this insanity to come. Just be ready. Every week, 30+ minute videos of this. Anyway, if you like this, consider liking, subscribing, and commenting, and thanks for watching.